Hello, and welcome to the Growing in Leadership podcast, a podcast that's designed to help you make a difference in your church. Our primary audience is the leaders of Woodland Park Baptist Church. But if you're outside of our church and watching this morning or listening, then we want you to be blessed and encouraged by that as well. This is our first ever episode, and it's my privilege in this first ever episode to have with me as our first guest, Pastor Chris Gustafson, the pastor of Eastern Heights Baptist Church in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Hi, Chris.
Yeah. Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
It is exciting to get this underway, and I'm thrilled about Chris being our first guest. Chris is one of the ministry people that I've known the longest time. Chris and I went to college together at Palm Beach Atlantic College in West Palm Beach, Florida, a long, long time ago. If we did that math, we'd both feel much older.
It's not.
Interesting thing is that when I first met Chris, he lived in a Sunday school classroom. Now they knew that, and that was because he was an intern for that church. But what was it like living in a Sunday school classroom?
It was interesting. It was an interesting setup. They had converted the Sunday school room. There were supposed to be interns that were in there, and it was an interesting living. But we had no oven. And we had a little tiny fridge, so we had to be pretty creative in our cooking.
And I would used to call you on your cell, not your cell, but your sill. I would throw rocks at your window.
Yes, that's exactly.
Yeah,
because we were on the second floor and you couldn't get up, so you had to throw rocks to.
But we had a lot of fun. We stayed up late many times and talked about church and theology and history and all kinds of things like that. Now, the pastor that was pastor of that church when you were intern is one of the most well-known Southern Baptist pastors in America today, Dr. Jack Graham.
Yeah.
So a couple questions there. Are you friends with Jack Graham on Facebook?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I once a year I send Jack Graham an email to tell him I'm still in ministry because he signed my license. So I want to let you know I'm still going.
So if you were to run into Jack Graham this afternoon, would he have any idea who you are?
Not an idea at all. No. I don't know. But his secretary knows who I am because once a year I send her an email. So
did he know who you were when you were living in a Sunday school classroom in his church?
I think he did, but that's only because his son at the time was in the youth group.
Okay.
And so we were working in the youth group. Now, the guy who interned under me, so the guy I was helping develop, he had a relationship with Jack Graham, and probably still does this day. And he's in ministry. Also, you remember Richard Jones?
Oh yeah.
So Richard was he was a high school senior, and then he came to PBA to go to school. And so he was kind of one of the guys that I was supposed to be working on. And then, of course, he's gone on to great things.
Richard's a fantastic person, and Richard has an important part of my life because we were friends. But Richard was the first person to ever call me pastor.
Really?
I wasn't a pastor. I had no idea that I was going to be a pastor. But Richard would come up to me and say, "Pastor Tim, you're going to be a pastor one day. You're going to be a pastor one day." It had never been on my radar. But Richard Jones was the first person that ever called me pastor. And
not surprising. Incredible guy.
And he was 6'7", and a good sized guy. So I didn't argue with him. So that's why I'm in ministry. I'm afraid that Richard is going to come and get me. Chris, how long you been at Eastern Heights?
I've been 23 years. May will be 24.
Okay, fantastic. What is the secret to staying at a church for a long time?
I'm too lazy to leave, and they're too lazy to look for a new pastor.
Now
I'll tell you now, all joking aside, the secret of staying is you stay till God tells you to leave. And there's all these other feelings that will come up with you wanting to leave. And you're like, I'm sick of this and I want to give this up. And it always comes back to you have to just be serious in your faith and say, okay, God, you put me here so I don't leave till you tell me to leave. And I don't know why I'm getting washed out on the video, but anyways, that's it always comes down to that. Is I always have to, and then as time comes on, you become so invested in people's lives that it's hard to think of leaving.
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
wonderful. You know, we think about those long pastorates, and there's two sides of it. It's the side of the pastor, and it's the side of the congregation. What does the congregation do to help a pastor stay for a while?
I tell you something that they've done here, and now no matter where you go, you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have issues. You're gonna have people. The thing about the church, it's amazing, is you have people who would not be friends in any other sort of situation, but because of Christ, are friends together. But we still have those differences. One of the things that Eastern Heights did really well is they treated my children well,
Hmm.
and my children at times uh, could be as rambunctious as anyone else's kids. Uh, and they did, for the most part, an excellent job of allowing them to be themselves. My younger one is on the spectrum, and the deacons were. I remember this one time, just kind of give you an example of them. He was sneaking in the kitchen eating, and we laid down the rule to him that he was not to, because he'd do it during the sermon, so no one could catch him. And we laid down the rule to him that he was no longer allowed to sneak into the kitchen and eat. And I catch him in there, and he's sitting in there eating cookies with the deacons. And that's the thing. He came to see them not as people who judge him, but people who loved him. And they said, "Come on, let's go get a cookie." And so
Hmm.
my kids had that positive experience. I've even asked my sons about that, and they said we didn't. Some of the horror
Hmm.
stories that we hear, we didn't get
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's a
Yeah,
beautiful thing to you have options. Oh, are we going to respond to this way, to this moment with sternness or with grace? And so I
yeah.
love that, and I'm grateful for that for your church and for your family and for your son. Uh, you know, you're describing something that your church does well. That's one of my questions. What is it that Eastern Heights does really well?
One of the things that Eastern Heights really does is they really care about people. Uh, we we kind of have a joke that we're the church for places where if you've gotten hurt in church, we're your church.
Yeah.
And besides having folks who have come to the gospel and got saved, we have a number of folks who've come to our church and are part of our church who at some point got hurt. And you find in our church a lot of grace, a lot of love. Uh, folks will be struggling, and we'll use a statement a lot of times. We go, "This is a season, and it's okay. You're in this season. And it's going to be all right." Um, and so that's one of the things I think is part of our DNA of everything we do, is like that, is letting people know, and most of the folks here have a story of at some point stepping away from church and coming back. And so they will share that story with people and say, "Hey, I was there, and here's what happened, and here's how I worked through that and coming back around."
So what contributes to that being part of the culture? How does that happen? How does somebody walk into your church and know, oh, this is safe. This is not like the place that I was wounded at. How does that happen?
Um, I, it's very intentional. You have to really develop sort of that mentality and being okay. And so it first of all starts from the pulpit, I think, and there's needs to be a humility that comes out of our, both,
Mm.
when we're with our music and with the preaching and our things. There's a humility of saying, "Here are the foundational things we believe. Here are the things that we can be open to discussing, and it's okay for us to discuss those things that occur." And so I think that first they've seen that the willingness to, we laugh. You mess up on a song, you stop, you stop the song, you laugh for a second, you go, "Okay, now we're all going to do it on the same key." You be okay with that sort of stuff, and it allows people that freedom to know that it's okay to mess up, to have mistakes. Uh, and then I think you just we sometimes we talk about fail well. If we're going to do a ministry, if you're going to try, we're going to try something, and if it bombs, that's okay,
Yeah, yeah.
because we went and we tried it, and that's all right to do. And so I think that's some of the things that we have done. We've pursued things that worked well, we've pursued things that didn't work well. And then there's it's funny, I and one other guy are the only two people who wear ties in the church. And
Okay.
I like dressing up on Sunday. Other people like dressing down. And we've got a mentality of, if you want to wear a coat and tie, wear a coat and tie. If you don't want to wear a coat and tie, don't wear a coat and tie. We're all okay with that. And so I think that that's lended itself that way too.
Okay, good. I like that. One of the things I noticed, and I've lost track of the passage of time, but you all are in a fairly new facility. Tell us about that facility. And I think the biggest thing I want to know is, how did you know that you needed that facility?
Well, so when I came to the church, kind of funny story. So I came to the church in my first full-time pastorate. I'd done bivocational work and decided that now was the time I needed to, if I was going to do this, I needed to do it. And so I stepped in and I get in the church. They had their first business meeting. We had $100 in the savings account. And one of the things they never mentioned to me, all the doctrinal questions they asked,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
one ever mentioned they were broke. So that's where we started. Well, when you have nothing, uh, you're willing, and they're looking at shutting the doors, you're willing to try some stuff. And so we began trying some stuff, and God was gracious and allowed us to make little improvements. And we as we went along the little improvements, we declared victories as we did them. Getting rid of the old chandeliers, putting in new ones. We were excited about that stuff. So eventually, the church, we grew to the point that we had maxed out our property, and we could not buy to the left or the right of us. And we had a neighbor behind us who really didn't like us, and we probably didn't like him much either. And so we brought in some outside people and we told them our story. And we said, what do you think we should do? And we had three options on the table. One was the split up and plant a church. The other one was just not do anything and just kind of stop. And the third one was to go and move. And so we brought outside people in and they would hear our story and then they would tell us, okay, I think you need to move. And so as we heard that story, that encouragement from other people allowed us to begin the process. We began praying. We moved a quarter of the mile from where we were.
Oh, wow.
So that we stayed right within our community, didn't leave our community at all. We have a 3-phase
Wow.
plan. We've done phase 1 and 2. Sometime this year, we will begin now the process of looking at doing the third phase, which will be the sanctuary. And so that just kind of began that process. And God has incredibly blessed us over the years. We've we're not huge. We're a congregation of we average 200 in worship, 250 in membership. But we've been healthy. We have money. We have more than $100 in savings now. And the other thing we've done in our church is we are a very volunteer-led church. So I am the only full-time staff. So a church of 200, only full-time staff. We have a couple of part-time staff, but we are very volunteer-led. So we had one of our pride was we had a family to leave the church one time. And the reason why is they said, you expect people to do stuff. And the church just swelled. Yes, we do. We this is family. This is part of being the church is
Yeah.
coming and being involved. So that's how we began that process. That's how we've done it. COVID slowed us up some, but it was also good. And I hate to say that because I
Yeah.
tell people COVID, there was absolutely nothing good out of it. But the one good thing is it made us stop and reevaluate some of the stuff we're doing as church.
That's for
And
sure.
I think that that's going to impact the way the sanctuary looks.
Okay. Okay. What difference has the move and the new facility made in your church? 'Cause, I mean, it was a
Um,
huge step of faith, and
oh
you had to
gosh.
make a decision, and you couldn't guarantee you were going to be right on whatever decision you made. So, now that 2/3 are done, what difference has it made?
So gosh, I would tell a lot of stories about that. One thing that it really invested everybody. We
Mm.
were all in this together. So you have ministries that you do in your church, and then they're good, different. But how many ministries do you do that invest everybody? So we all were jumping into this at the same time, and so there was a vested interest to make it happen and to make it occur, and so everyone was united on this this cause of we feel like this is what God's called us to do. We're committing ourselves to it. And so that was really a good uniting.
Yeah.
On a personal side, it's when I got diagnosed with being depressed. And so it was, for me, there's a lot of excitement going on, but it was a horrifying time that I realized I dealt with depression. And I dealt with it for years, but I'd masked it well. So I ended up having to deal with that as the church was going through that. So some other tough things, but for your leadership, it can be really disturbing in that sort of respect.
You found that the intensity of the extra responsibilities or things were exposed in that season? What talk to me about that a little bit
So
more.
you probably remember from college, I often was very humorous and joking and
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
but that's a mask I use a lot to, I am very much a people pleaser. And so I want people to get along. I want people to enjoy each other. Um, and there's good to that, and there's bad to that. The bad is you're doing a building program, you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to run around, and I convinced myself, wrongly, but I convinced myself that I was sort of holding it all together. I'm the linchpin that's keeping this all together, which is baloney. But once you get that in your mind, it's hard to get it out. And you know, I'd been taught some stuff by people
Yeah.
that I don't think they meant to teach it to me. Uh, One of the things that I was taught is, they say the church rises and falls on its leader.
Yeah,
And
I was going to say we've been trained. Good church
yeah,
means good pastor. Good pastor means good church.
right.
It's you, man. It's you.
And if
And
the church is bad, yeah. And it
and we
just,
believe it because we're like, well, you know what? My work really does matter.
yeah. And we want to have a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Because one of the tough things about pastoring, I don't think people realize a lot of times, is it's hard to measure success in
Yeah.
pastoring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aside from numbers, and that's a really terrible way of measuring success. But let's be honest, who's the big speakers? The
Yeah.
speakers are the ones in the big churches who are publishing, but are those really the most successful people? And so when you're trying to balance all that, and I was trying to balance all that, and you probably have leaders who are exactly the same way. They want their those under their care to be getting along with each other. And pretty soon you start playing that. My wife will talk, says you're trying to be Jesus.
Mm.
You need to get off the cross.
Yeah.
And so in that process, I just had a complete breakdown, and ended up going to a doctor and ended up diagnosing me with depression. And it was incredibly humbling to
Sure.
have to say, oh my gosh, as a Christian, I'm supposed to have it all together, and I don't have it all together. Which, again, began some of my teaching of saying, just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you don't have some issues you're dealing with.
Was that an
So,
easy thing for you to communicate with the church? Did you
no,
process that for a while?
yeah,
Talk
no,
to me about that.
I kept it very quiet for a long time. Yeah, I kept it myself. One of the things, because I didn't want to seem like I'm one of those people, that, look at me, I've got this problem. Which, backing up, when I first came to the church, I got diagnosed with seizures. So I'm at the church. I'm at the church with $100 in savings account, and I get seizures and I can't drive for a year. So I'd already kind of milked the whole I got a medical issue thing, and I didn't want to seem as the
Mm.
victim again. What changed me was I began to start seeing members who were dealing with depression, and they were feeling like less than Christians. And so I realized at that point, that I had this obligation to say, you're not alone.
Mm.
And let me tell you a little bit of my story. And that began to open the door for other folks in the church to say, hey, I deal with, I'm bipolar. And people are like, really? Yeah, because that's why this month of the year, oh, wow. And, and then we had some other folks in the church go through stuff, and it just kind of freed it up. So I realized that, that passage where Paul talks about, in my weakness, he is strong. I came to get a whole new appreciation of what that was all about. Was
Well,
Yeah, we communicate that.
and when I ask, how does your church know that it's a safe place to not be perfect? And how does your church know? How does someone come into your church and know that it's okay to be a wounded person? Well, I mean, you just answered that question, a little bit later in our conversation when the pastor says, here are the things that I carry, here are the things that I'm struggling with. And it does not diminish my faith.
Yeah.
In fact, it strengthens my faith. And there's no masks in this place, man. That's fantastic, Chris. I'm grateful again for you and for the church that you lead to have that kind of environment. Um, we talked a little bit about leadership. Um, idea that your church has a part of its culture, like, yeah, people here are supposed to do something, and are supposed to work and contribute, because we are talking about growing in leadership, and that's who we
Yeah.
target this to, are people who are leading in their church. How does your church define a leader?
So a lot of for us, and we have the defines, we have in churches, and we kind of develop people and growing up in leadership. So we'll see somebody with potential, and we put them under somebody, and there's kind of an informal discipling that goes up. Our Sunday school teachers do this really well. Sunday school is kind of our bread and butter
Yeah.
around here. We don't do home groups, we do Sunday school. And every Sunday school teacher has a person in place that if they drop dead would step in and teach their Sunday school class the next morning. And it's not like they just have them out there, they're giving them time teaching. And so they're working through people, trying to find those individuals, then working with them, getting them to know the folks in the class. Sometimes what happens is, uh, like we've seen recently, is a teacher will say, "Okay, this person just needs to be teaching."
Yeah.
And so we're gonna split my class and we're gonna let them go teach because this needs to be going on. Or sometimes we've had folks who say, this person's excelling better than me. I'm going to go into the background and enable them to take over teaching. And so a lot of our other leadership places do that too. Like women's ministry, the leaders pick future people to come in and work with and then take their place. Our finance committee does the same thing. So we got an unorthodox way, like we don't do nominations and we don't vote in people. When the finance committee, someone wants to step out the finance committee goes and finds somebody and asks, would you like to come and be on finance
Yeah.
committee? And so they're kind of watching and getting to know people, and they're getting to make sure that people understand the DNA. And so, and then they balance themselves too. So they'll say, if we have a really go-getter in our group, and they love being in charge, but we don't have an organizer.
Right.
Then what we need to find is an organizer. Not, and there could be two or three people like that'd be great in that ministry, but we need an organizer. And so we go get the organizer, and they come into the ministry instead of ending up in the ministry with a bunch of go-getters, but no one's organizing.
Do you have some people that every once in a while you go to that basically, like Richard Jones did to me, said, I see something in you. You may not see it yet, but let me speak this into you, that you're supposed to be in this role, and to have people who have never even thought about being a church leader or a teacher or an organizer or a team leader or a committee member. Do you have that as an experience?
Yeah, one that kind of happens organically with some of our folks is they'll target somebody. Like I had one of my deacons come up to me recently and said, "Hey, I think we ought to let this guy have a teaching opportunity. I'm
Hmm.
seeing something here." And so you have to be willing in leadership to allow other people to direct you, even though you're the leader. And so I realized that, okay, he's seeing something I'm not seeing,
Yeah.
and I didn't really see it, but I was like, he's in a leadership position. I got to respect that. There's a joke in the church, though. If I come up and sit down next to you and say, "Hey, I've been praying about something," get away as fast as you can, because there's folks in church will all tell me, they'll say,
Yeah. Yeah.
"Yeah," as soon as he showed up to praying about, but they'll also say, and he was right.
Hmm.
And the other thing we do in our church is we'll do things. Sometimes we use the term interim or for a season.
Yeah.
Like it's some churches, you get into a position and you can't ever leave it. or you feel guilty to leave it.
Right.
We don't do that. We do a very open door in which we say, you stay. And if you feel like God's telling you it's time to go, then you better go. And we applaud that. We celebrate people when they're stepping down. So we've had folks for a year and a half serve in a ministry and then say, okay, I've done what God's called me to do here. There's somebody else out there. And I think you have a lot of people in churches who really want to be doing something else than what they're doing, but they've
Mm.
made a commitment and they have no idea how to get out of that commitment because everyone keeps telling them the worst thing you can say to somebody. Don't ever say to somebody, I don't know what we would do without you, because that clicks in somebody's mind. I have to stay here even though I think I should be moving on.
Wow. Somebody, I think one of our former staff members, and we haven't fully implemented this or even begun to implement it, but he talked about doing exit interviews with people when they step away from ministry. Okay, you're not going to serve in this area. Tell me what you learned. Tell me what you grew in. Tell me what you think God might be doing in your life next. We're not going to shove it to you next, but just what you're describing, but help that person think through that and then begin to be looking for ways in which, okay, there is a new season that's coming. How do we help that person get to that new season? Maybe some of the folks in our church that are listening to this right now, that might be where they are. It's like, man, I've been doing this forever and it just doesn't fit me anymore. And there's another part of the church that I really like to. I think that we need to grow as a church like yours is, that says, no, there's permission to do that, and there's not guilt that you're stepping away from this place that you have held together for a long time.
Yeah. Something our church did, now this is recently new, we started it 2 years ago, is we set aside money for, we call them grants. But if
Okay.
somebody in the church wants to try something,
Oh,
we
wow.
will give them money to go try it and see what happens. And we've had one funny one is a guy, the previous church he's at, they used to do a trivia night.
Okay.
And so we gave him money, and this, you invite folks who don't come to church to come to trivia night. Been a great success.
Okay.
It's been really fun. And then just recently, the grant group just gave money to somebody to start a grief support group. Never was on our radar to do that. Person had gone through an experience, and so the church said, here's the money, we'll buy the material. And they're like, what if it doesn't work out? And we go, that's what you throw it out there and
no, I
you
love
see what
that.
happened. Yeah.
And I
So
think
that's
that's
been going on for 2 years.
I think that's really, really good for a church budget to have some flexibility, to have some resources that say, listen, we don't know what this is going to look like this year. Well, we don't know what might unfold. I mean, a year is a really long time, and things come and go in the life of a church. So I love the idea that setting aside a portion of the budget, even if it's not a large portion of the budget, that says, we're going to see what God unfolds, and we're going to be ready for it in some way. That's good. Easter's coming. What's your church doing to get ready for Easter?
We this is funny with it. We don't do a whole lot.
Okay.
A number of years ago, we do, we'll do Good Friday service, which has always been a popular one for us to do. And we moved our Easter egg hunt to after church on Sunday, as opposed to Saturday. We were so competing with so much of the community, and we realized folks come on Sunday, let's just have the Easter egg hunt for them. But a number of years ago, we did this really big blowout Easter Sunday. And one of our young deacons came to me and he said, if people come back next Sunday, they're going to figure out we don't do this every week. And I don't know if he meant it in a joking sense or what, but we went back and it hit the leadership hard. And we suddenly realized what we're doing should be what we're doing all the time. So Easter, you're going to have a little bit more music. Some folks are going to dress up a little bit more than they usually do.
Yeah.
But if you come back the next Sunday, you're going to get about the same thing you got for Easter.
Okay.
And we just went over that mentality of, there's a specialness to the holiday. It's going to be a resurrection sermon, a little bit more evangelistic, But if you come back next week, you're not going to notice anything significantly much different.
Like, where'd everybody go?
Yeah, where did everyone
where'd the
go?
fireworks go? Yeah.
Where's the big choir special and stuff? We came to that conclusion. We thought we need to be presenting. So, aside from the kind of the special services that come up to it, and if you come back the next week, you're not going to get an Easter egg hunt. But beyond that, we're going to have, you're going to get about the same thing that you'd get every Sunday.
Okay. Tell me what the next problem or project or puzzle that you're trying to solve in your church.
So, one, I mentioned we're finally decided we're going to start looking at the next expansion. So that'll be, I've had to build myself up to being, as a matter of fact, I said it in a meeting and a couple of the people asked me if I was sick, if I was okay. Couldn't believe I'm ready to go that way. We've moved. Our worship minister has now become our family pastor. So we have he's taken the associate position, part-time position. He's seminary trained and all, but he feels called to be in the workplace. So he's taken that. So now we're looking for a new worship pastor. And that, of course, is, I use that term, worship pastor. Broadly, there's a lot that they do, but that changes the nature of everything. And so there's kind of a feeling of kind of holding the breath right now.
Yeah.
To see who's God going to bring, what's that going to look like. We've been very blessed with the individuals that have been in charge of that, have been just done a terrific job and just are just really godly in the way they've handled it and helped the church. So we're looking at that, but it's also been kind of a moving him in the family pastor. What does that position look like, and what should he be doing with that? So that's probably what's going on right now.
Okay.
So the church is kind of in this influx of, okay, what's that going to look like? What's going to happen next?
All right. We're in the process of searching for a worship pastor too. So, it is a challenge, and you do hold it. But like you, we've got several lay people that have been filling in and really, really holding it up for us, and we're really, really grateful for that.
Well, if any of the people who are looking at your church would like to be in a place with more seasons, tell them to give me.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And if some folks that you're looking at that would like to be close to Mardi Gras, let me know as well. And like a good gumbo as well. Chris, you've never been to our church. You don't know our church. But if God put on your heart and your spirit that you were supposed to write an epistle to Woodland Park Baptist Church and to the leaders of Woodland Park Baptist Church, what would be the one thing that you'd want to communicate to our leaders?
I would tell them what a minister told me who was nearing retirement. When I first went into the pastorate, I went to see this guy, well respected, loved in our association, absolutely godly man, just recently went home to be with the Lord. And I sat down with him, and for about 30 minutes, I griped about the church, everything wrong with the church. And he looked at me and he told me, he says, Chris, you need to love God and you need to love the people. That's it. He says, you get a point that you stop loving God or you stop loving your people, you're in a bunch of trouble. And I would tell your leaders, here's the two things you need to be doing. You need to be loving God and you need to be loving those people. And even if they're folks that you disagree with, you don't get along with, you voted differently, you have different hobbies or whatever, God's put you in that position of leadership. And he has commanded you to love every one of them and to love him. And if you're focusing on loving him, you're going to avoid a whole lot of problems in life. And if you're focusing on loving them, they're going to overlook a whole lot of your problems. Good. And so that would be my short epistle to them.
Well, good. I appreciate it, Chris. That's going to be our time today. But I really, really appreciate spending time with you and catching up with you a little bit. You've been a great first guest for us. I'm grateful for you and for your ministry, for your friendship, and for our time together. Let me pray for you and for your church today. Our Heavenly Father, I thank you for Chris. Lord, I thank you for Sheila. Lord, I thank you for their family. Lord, I pray that you just continue to bless Chris. Lord, I thank you for his transparency. Lord, I thank you for his faithfulness. Lord, I thank you for the fact that he has joy about the work that you've called him to. And so, Lord, I pray that you would bless Eastern Heights Baptist Church. Lord, I pray that it would have a strong, powerful influence in its community. Lord, I pray that it would continue to grow leaders. Lord, I pray that it would continue to develop people, not just to staff the church, but Lord, so that their ministry in the life of the church would be an expression of their discipleship and their growth in you. Lord, we pray these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Tim.
you very much. Thank you for joining us for Growing in Leadership, a podcast to help you make a difference in your church. We'll be back next month with another church leader. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching.